Even though we can glean all kinds of amazing insights from big data, sometimes still we want to ask specific questions to our customers. And when we do this, we sort of implicitly assume that the answers that we get reflect opinions that exist, that are already in our consumers' heads, and we're tapping into those beliefs that they have. But this research stream that I'm going to share with you does suggest that, well, sometimes we ask consumers questions and it's something they never really thought about, actually, until we ask them that question. So they create their beliefs in response to the question, or they have an idea already there, but by asking them that question, we make it much more salient and accessible than had we not asked the question. More recently, we looked at an online grocery context. So these were all existing customers of a relatively new online grocer in France. And here, rather than a quasi-experiment, we could do more of a real field experiment where we would randomly pick some customers and ask them to complete a customer intention survey and then match them to another group of customers who were just living their lives, not even knowing they're part of an experiment. They're just not buying their groceries as they normally would, and we could compare the behavior of the two different groups. And what we found is the group whose intentions were measured were more likely to come back and repeat purchase with this online French grocer. They were also more likely to do so more quickly. It took them fewer days to come back. And probably most importantly, they were more profitable customers. What is it about being asked these survey questions that lead to these profound changes in behavior? What we think is mostly going on is that when you're asked the question, it's bringing something to mind more so than it would have been to mind had you not been asked the question. What it brings to mind might be different depending on the context. In some case, it might be your attitude about the product that you were just asked or the product category. Sometimes I'll show you some study in a minute where it's I'm making a certain brand more accessible, so I become more likely to buy a particular brand. In other cases, if it's habitual behavior, what the question might do is remind me of what I've done in the past, and I might just reinforce or even polarize habitual behavior, and I'll show you some evidence for that. And for other kinds of behavior, we'd like to do things a little bit differently. And what the question might do is remind us of our norm, of our goal, and we might move behavior towards those norms. The second area, and I'll just share with you one study here, is the impact of measuring satisfaction on behavior. So we're going to see very similar effects. This experiment took place over the course of the year. All the people who participated were existing customers of the bank. There was an intervention where some customers got the routine satisfaction surveys, others didn't. The others who didn't, again, are just living their life, not really knowing they're part of an experiment, but the bank shared their data with us. And those whose satisfaction was measured, they filled out this survey one time, and then we monitored their behavior for a year. The dark bar is the group who was sent the satisfaction survey. They were much more likely to open a new account sometime in the 12 months after the time of the intervention. They were much less likely to defect and leave the bank. They had more accounts on average by the end of the period than those who were just living their lives. And like we saw for the French grocery data, they became more profitable customers as well. The underlying mechanism is a little bit different because here there's some firm signaling too. The kind of firm who cares about what I think about them, they care about me, they care about my opinion. So I think that works in the firm's favor and might drive some of the effect. I think there also might be an informative component of the survey. What we've been looking at more recently is less whether I ask the question or not. Everyone's participating in a study, but I'm changing the way people are thinking and looking at the impact that that has on their behavior. And we have a lot of different studies on this. It's not all survey-based. I'm just going to share one study with you that looks at it in the context of a conjoint study. When people see big, broad survey questions or big, broad categories, wine, red and white, cheese, hard and soft, versus very nuanced categories, we look, our mind is tuned to be able to, when we think broad, to look for the gist in any situation. What's the most salient thing that I need to focus on to get the job done, to make a decision, to solve a problem? On the other hand, when we see these very narrow survey questions or categories. I go to the wine store and the wines are categorized all different ways, or the cheeses are categorized all different ways. Our mind has this flexibility to either do this broad thing, but when we need to, we can zone down and really focus in on all the intricate details between things. So I can get into a mindset where I become very much more multidimensional, and I focus on all the different moving parts that are going on. And so in this conjoint context, what we argued would happen is if we tune people before with these broad questions, they're going to focus on one or two salient attributes when they do the conjoint. On the other hand, if we tune them to look at these very narrow questions before, many more attributes are going to matter to them. They're not going to just focus on one or two salient ones. They're going to place more value on even more of them, and their price sensitivity, therefore, will go down because they'll be willing to pay for more features. We're taking advantage of the psychology of humans that we can narrow down or we can be broad, and that you can create a mindset, and that mindset that carries over to subsequent behavior. Of course, what really matters is what people are going to do in the marketplace, but we can now maybe think about matching what we're doing in the conjoint to the way consumers are most likely to think in the marketplace to be able to more accurately measure what features are going to be most important and which price elasticity is the real price elasticity. I think what we've learned across all these different studies is that we need to do this measurement. I don't think surveys are ever going to go away, but we need to keep in our mind that measurement can have these unintended consequences. Now, unintended consequences sounds bad. Some of these unintended consequences are pretty good, especially for us as marketers. We can increase purchasing and profitability. We can get our consumers to pay more attention and be more careful and look at all the great information and features that we're providing them. Maybe we decrease price sensitivity. I don't know if that's in the real world yet, but perhaps. So is this great? Should we be surveying our customers more and more and more because it leads to all these good outcomes? Well, I want to caution you. So I would say not necessarily, definitely not. We need to be careful because what I've argued from a conceptual level is we're bringing different things to mind, and you're only going to see good behaviors if you're bringing good things to mind. So it's going to depend very much on what thoughts come to mind and the valence of those thoughts. There's also been other research that's been done that if consumers believe that this is being done with persuasive intent, if they look at this, so we see, some of our politicians do this, they'll give us a survey, but it's not really a survey. They're asking us about the issues that are most important to them, and then they follow up with a donation request. Those kinds of things don't work so well because we know why they're being done. And so if consumers realize that this is being done as a selling tool as opposed to a mirror to understand what consumers are about, it's going to backfire. On the other hand, this could be something really interesting to think about. When can we use this to maybe nudge consumers to do things that would make them happier, either from a public policy perspective or from a marketing perspective, to help our consumers out. So it's a simple intervention that might help to reinforce beneficial behaviors that consumers would like to do more, weaken harmful behaviors that they would like to do less. It's simple, it's cheap. These, we can put these in routine surveys, self-administered surveys, and as I mentioned in the GYM study, it's also been shown to work in mass communication. You have to get the consumer to pose the question to themselves. And in marketing, I think it's simple tools that, again, marketers can use to reinforce desirable routine habitual behaviors, dampen undesirable behaviors, and help the consumer to do what the consumer would like to do while helping ourselves at the same time. But again, I urge a lot of caution because the effects don't always move in the direction that we as marketers might view to be positive directions.